The Seahawks get quarterback Sam Howell from the Washington Commanders. Now, this is going to be an interesting debate between people because I've seen it debated on Twitter already, some Instagram comments, and I know it's going to be debated on YouTube and anybody you talk Seahawks football with, because there's a few aspects of this trade that are interesting. The Seahawks traded their 3rd-round pick and their 5th-round pick to get back a 5th and a 6th, and they get Sam Howell from Washington. Now, obviously, you can start with the 3 points. One, we get our backup for sure. Young, I think he's 24 years old. He threw for pretty much 4,000 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 21 picks. The picks need to come down. And almost 300 rushing yards with 5 touchdowns. So overall, when you look at it, we have a really solid backup, and it's cheaper than Drew Lock. His cap hit is $1 million and some. Drew Lock would be at $4 or $5 million. So overall, that move is fine. Number 2, it takes you away from the Justin Fields possibility. Now, that's been something that's been talked about a lot. Is Justin Fields going to end up being a Seahawk, or where is he going to go in general? It seems like he has no market, and I'm guessing his price was just way too much for the Seahawks to want to take for a backup quarterback, and Sam Howell was probably a good enough price. So they did it. And number 3 would be the fact that, is there a chance that he somewhat competes with Geno Smith? Or, this is a slash, are the Seahawks trying to have him as a piece that will be the starter after next year, after learning a year behind Geno Smith? He will be on payroll in 2025 for like $1 million. I'll give you the exact number. It'll be for $1.1 million, and the cap number is also 1.1, while Geno Smith will be off contract by then. And who knows what the situation is if he gets re-signed. But I'm just saying, is there a chance? And maybe yes. They like his arm, his work ethic, his toughness. He was actually very competent and actually a decent quarterback with a really, really, really bad Washington Commanders team whose coach got fired as well. I know it's Ron Rivera, but they did not do a good job competing in Washington. And there's like a 3A, 3B, right? The last one would be, does that mean we're not drafting a quarterback anymore? Because John Schneider's been all about this. Do we draft a quarterback? Or we're not proud of not drafting a quarterback in so many years. So I'm trying to figure out what that answer is. But let's go through all these scenarios. Number 1, a good backup. That's always important regardless. Drew Lock was important to us last year. I know we didn't make the playoffs, but we would not have been in playoff contention week 18 against the Cardinals where we won that game, and if the Bears had beat the Packers, we would have been in the playoffs. We wouldn't even be in that scenario if Drew Lock didn't find a way to win that game against the Eagles when Geno Smith went down. A good backup can be extremely valuable to your team, for the quarterback room, for in case of emergency. I think Sam Howell is just as good, if not probably slightly better, upside-wise than Drew Lock. Maybe Drew Lock has much more experience and might be more prepared to be a backup and more prepared to do what he did against the Eagles last year. But Sam Howell probably has more upside right now at 24 years old, the arm talent he has, and all that good stuff. And that's very important for a team. Part 2 here is, like I said, the Justin Fields stuff. Justin Fields, I'm worried he has no market for him. I'm worried for him. I mean, he might be stuck with absolutely no market right now. And I don't know what that's going to mean for him as a quarterback, because that just sucks. I mean, it's not fun to have no market as a quarterback. And number 3 is, can Sam Howell compete? And I want to go through some numbers. And I don't want this to be an overreaction, because I'm not sitting here saying he's going to compete. But I will go through some things here, which is 1. Corbin Smith did tweet that John Schneider was smitten over Sam Howell in the 2022 draft. It was somebody that he really liked and was really interested in getting, because obviously I think that was the year that they knew you might need a backup moving forward, or you might need a guy for the future. Number 2 is 2 years left, $2.05 million left on the contract. And they are saying that, according to Brady Henderson, they checked the sources about how they felt about Sam Howell going into the draft and all those times. And the sources say the arm talent, the work ethic, smarts, toughness, and ability to extend plays while keeping his eyes downfield is something they were interested in at the time, which is an important thing to remember. And no doubt the contract also had appeal. 2 years left and just $2.085 million is what Seattle will owe him. So all these factors are very important when you look at it. There is a chance that he is somewhat of an interest for the future, for competing now, or whatever it may be. Or if Geno Smith gets hurt, knock on wood, the Seahawks think, hey, we kind of have a guy that we like one of those dudes that we like as a backup. And the fourth point, like I said, was the draft. I'm confused now unless they are I feel like it's clear almost that they're not going to use that 16th pick on a quarterback. I mean, I'd be surprised if they traded back 20 picks in back-to-back rounds to go get a backup quarterback if you're going to draft a guy. So that's kind of a complicated scenario there. And then on top of everything else, where we have no picks between 16 and until the fourth round almost. We traded the third rounder. So it's going to be interesting to see where would they take a quarterback if they were going to, and where would they use that, right? I don't think it's going to happen unless they maybe find one of their guys super late, 5th, 6th round. But those guys probably don't come in and compete, right? You're like what happened with Russell Wilson was a rare scenario. So let's not pretend like that's very normal. Sam Howell, though, in general, let's go through some of the numbers. Like I said last year, played all 17 games. It was a 63.4 completion percentage. He had 3,946 yards, which was not bad. 21 touchdowns, 21 picks. The picks is where it is, right? Because if you don't have those picks, I'm telling you his numbers are comparable to a lot of guys. He had more passing yards than Derek Carr, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Geno Smith, played 15 games. More than Gardner Minshew, who is a guy that people love, right? And got a starting job after an injury last year. He was 12th in passing yards. He was right there with almost the same amount of passing yards as Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Stafford, Sam Howell. That's the order. All within, they were all within 98 yards of each other. Baker Mayfield, Trevor Lawrence, Matt Stafford, and Sam Howell. And those 21 touchdowns is the same amount as that Trevor Lawrence had. It's the 21 picks that were a concern. But it was also on a really bad Commanders team and an undisciplined team, and his weapons are much different if he were in Seattle. Now, I'm not saying all this to say that, he's going to be the starter. Absolutely not what I'm saying. I'm talking about these stats for two reasons. Number one is because there is a future involved here. He is 23 years old. He'll be 24 during the season. But there is a future involved with the Seahawks. Geno Smith's not under contract next year. If they find this guy in the building and love him, you never know what that means for the future. Number two, there's always a way that somebody blows somebody away in camp or whatever happens, like the Russell Wilson situation once. And number three is injuries happen. We saw it last year. Drew Lock came out and played. So with all that said, if the end of the season for Sam Howell last year, maybe he was pushing a little too hard. A lot of picks, a lot of bad games to end the season. And I think that's where Washington definitely lost a lot of faith with him. Because the 3 games before that, his best game, he had 2 really good games, one against the Eagles and one against the Seahawks. Against the Seahawks, he passed for 312 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks, which is pretty crazy if you think about it, that our defense was giving up so much shit to quarterbacks. Against the Eagles, he had 397 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 1 pick. But it was all over the place. Some games with no touchdowns and 4 picks. 1 touchdown, 2 picks. No touchdowns and a pick. 3 touchdowns, no picks. 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. 3 touchdowns, no picks. With 151 yards against Atlanta in a win. So it was kind of like all over the place. This is definitely a transaction based off of what they believe his talent is, what they believed it was when they went into the draft a couple years ago, and what they saw from him against Seattle last year. John Schneider saw, hey, maybe this guy's fixable. Let's not forget, the guy who's starting for us right now, our starting quarterback, Geno Smith. Let's not forget that Geno Smith, in his first full year as a quarterback in the NFL, let's compare the numbers. That's actually an interesting way to look at it. First full year in the NFL, Sam Howell had a 63% completion percentage, Geno Smith 55. 3,900 yards for Sam Howell, 3,046 yards for Geno Smith. 21 touchdowns for Sam Howell, 12 touchdowns for Geno Smith, 21 picks, and 21 picks, both of them in their rookie seasons. And Geno Smith, remember, lost the next year at 13 touchdowns, 13 picks, ended up losing his job and never started again until 2022, until like 7 years later. Sam Howell was a better quarterback than Geno Smith in his rookie year, and that's not saying much. I'm not saying, or not his rookie year, his first year starting. And I know it's not saying much, but I'm just saying that you never know when people believe in a talent and they believe he's somebody that has some potential to develop, that it could mean something one day. The ironic part of it all, when, in sports in general, or when you talk about Seahawks football like this, like I do on YouTube, the ironic part is it could also mean nothing. And, we talked about this on our podcast. We did an emergency podcast on the Seattle on Tap page. If you want to find the podcast, just look up Sports on Tap Seattle anywhere, or at Seattle on Tap, and it's on YouTube. I'll link it down there. We just did this emergency pod. It could mean absolutely nothing also. And that's where these type of trades are funny. Even sometimes drafts are funny. When we drafted Russell Wilson, everyone thought, we drafted our backup. We have Matt Flynn. It means absolutely nothing. Ends up being a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Sometimes you trade for a guy like this, though, or you draft a guy, and it means absolutely nothing. They never see the field. So who knows exactly what it means? I just know that he did an okay job with little to no support offensively last year. And that team was just not very good. And, I'm not saying that we're going to see him much, because I know there's a lot of questions behind it, but he is also good on his legs, which is a nice part of it as well. So if he does ever get in there, it's a nice piece. If he doesn't, maybe it's just a nice cushion at backup quarterback and at a cheap option. Like I mentioned earlier, Drew Lock's going for like $4 or $5 million a year now. Sam Howell's going for 1.9 or 1.8, whatever it is, 2 years, 2 point something left. So money matters to these teams, and it matters when you can get a guy for just a little bit cheaper that you still believe can be all right. And that's obviously what this situation is. We'll see what else the Seahawks do. Once again, you got to quote me. I'm not saying Geno Smith will not be the quarterback. I think he will be, and I'm almost 100% certain. But Sam Howell is a good talent, so don't sleep on the talent ever, because sometimes talent shows up later. You never know. Love y'all. Peace.